Okay, the game disappeared for a second. Okay, hello everyone. Today I have a special guest with me, so say hello. Okay, the game disappeared. Oh, and okay, guess it didn't mute. Okay, there we go. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I am Sergeant Mushroom. I do a lot of rating-based content. I primarily investigate the game and how to best play it. On my own channel, I have a lot of stuff related to both me just doing random things with the game and, of course, things involving how to play it best.
Yeah, and he does. Oh, hey Alex, how are you doing? Yeah, so he does a lot of statistical analysis that's really helpful. You can also find him on the Reddit and the Discord helping people when they get stuck. So we thought it would be a cool idea for us to teach you how to evaluate positional players to figure out where they're going to play on your team. But, like, that wasn't the original plan of the stream, so you're going to have to sit through our first thing. Oh, thank you, Cause Longhorn, for the follow. And who let Teddy in here? Teddy has been a consistent viewer of mine for a long time, so I think the more accurate thing is who let you in here. And you need to speak with Colonel Mushroom. Her sergeant is loose again. But yeah, so what we originally had planned was we were going to be discussing things we'd like to see in future releases of Out of the Park, specifically in the franchise section. So we're going to do that first, and then we're going to go into the positional stuff. So if you're not into that, I'm sorry that we lied to you. But, like, you should listen to it anyway, because it'll be interesting. So, yes, Teddy is very consistent. Alright, so, would you like to start us off? We don't know what's on each other's list, by the way, and we have, like, 10-ish things each.
Alright, so I guess I will start off with my most interesting one, which is international development. This is a pretty broad category, but I'll just go through it. So the first thing...
International agents are dizzy, aren't they? Darn it. Okay, sorry.
The first thing is that we have huge populations globally in areas like Africa, Europe, the Middle East, India, and China, where there are very few major league players produced. So, of course, it's a huge baseball responsibility to be able to tap into those populations and grow the game there in order to expand talent, essentially. So, there should be some kind of way in out of the park baseball where you can essentially introduce a stronger love of baseball in those areas and eventually expand the level of talent that comes out of them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that scouting could be improved by creating a world map and then splitting up into different regions, something like they've got in Franchise Hockey Manager, where you can send individual regional scouts, which would work somewhat like your head scout, I'd imagine, except, of course, each scout only goes to a separate region. You select certain areas for each individual scout to go to, and they are then responsible for scouting the players in those specific areas.
Yeah, I mean, like, that seems cool.
So the third thing would be being able to fund the growth of baseball facilities and the creation of feeder teams internationally, which would essentially be something along the lines of building new facilities in different areas at, of course, whatever excess money you've got at the end of the season, and then eventually you would be able to improve your talent stream from those areas.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this is something that we sort of see with some countries, you know, helping fund other countries with all of their sporting endeavors. Like, where they help build, like, stadiums, and they send coaches. So that could be a pretty cool thing to add. I have no idea if there was a movie that did that, Teddy.
There was a movie about a scout going to India to get a pitcher. I don't remember what it was called, though.
Okay. So, yeah, my stuff I don't think is a lot more basic than I think a lot of things on your list. But, so my first one is, and this is something that probably might take a couple versions of the game to get there because of specific engine requirements, but and it's sort of two in one. Proper diacritic markings on players' names and accurate town names for international players or in international leagues. So for the first thing is, for example, if you go to, let's go to the Braves here and look at Ronald Acuna Jr., he should have a tilde over the N on his name. And that isn't reflected in the engine. And, you know, in English, we don't really use diacritic marks. But just because we don't use them doesn't mean that they don't mean anything in other languages. And right now, I know the engine can't support it, but I think it would be really cool. One, because it would be how these people properly have their names. But two, it also tells you how to pronounce a lot of names. Because if you know what those diacritic marks mean, or an accent mark, you know where to stress something, and that will help the players of the game be able to properly pronounce some of these guys' names. But, and then also with like the town names, if you've ever tried to add towns, I found this when I was creating the Israel Baseball League, a lot of times the game has a town in the database, but it can't figure out what the sound is, particularly the sound in Hebrew, so it just has an underscore. It's not romanized properly. So I'd like for that to be looked at, just so we can make sure that all of the international towns are not producing strange underscore glitches. Yeah. Oh, so the $1 Million Arm, Rack and Jack is saying, was the movie. An Endeavor. They're all debating movies. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think it's definitely a really good idea. I think it would be a great idea to correct things like that. Definitely would help to give us an idea of what we're looking at, rather than just, oh, everything is just plain English.
Yeah. Oh, and Happy New Year's, almost New Year, James. Oh, A League of Their Own, Bull Durham. These are all great movies. Alright, so what's your next thing?
Alright, so I guess I will go to some of the lamer stuff on my list, relatively speaking now. My next thing is the improved simulation module data, which is something I have wanted ever since I got into the game, pretty much. So right now, simulation modules are pretty limited in terms of what you can get after you go through it. There are certain statistics that you can see for certain teams and players, but you ultimately cannot adjust what you see, as far as I know, and it's not as much data as you would like. So as somebody who collects a lot of information through their simulation modules, I really would like to have it customizable so that you can look at pretty much whatever you want and collect data however you like.
Lobat, the guest is Sergeant Mushroom 39. And yeah, that's a really good idea. It would make a lot of the stuff that you do a lot easier. And Alex says that he wonders if the accented characters is due to the ASCII character crashing issues the game has. You know, that wouldn't surprise me. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think like simulation tools like that, it would allow us to simulate things on a larger scale. Definitely.
Yeah, it would be really helpful in terms of being able to understand the game more easily.
Yeah. So my next thing is actually a little bit one of my more complicated ones. I would like to have another personnel person who is your chief marketing officer.
Oh,
and
that's one of mine too.
Oh, okay. So see, we have overlap. So, and I'll talk about mine first, and then you can talk about yours. So, in my situation, you would have sort of like how you have on your team home screen. You have scouting and a development budget. You would also have a marketing budget. And depending on how much you put into the budget determines what you receive from it. So, and these are things like advertising opportunities from companies. These are things like the opportunity to sponsor products within your area. And another thing would be television opportunities for your players to allow them to gain popularity nationally and locally. So like if you put a bunch of money into your marketing, you could get an opportunity for 2 or 3 of your players to go on national TV, and you can pick which players to choose, like that you want to send, and that would allow you to maybe take one of your unknown players, and if they go on the show, they'll gain popularity. So it would have a noticeable impact on your players, and that would increase your fan interest as well. Oh, and I don't know if yours is similar.
Pretty much exactly the same. I didn't have everything you had, but I definitely agree with everything you had. I think all of those things would be really interesting to add to the game. So, aside from that, I had, and this was really my first point on the financials, is to make the system more realistic. Because right now, teams don't make that much money relative to where they are in real life.
Yes.
Almost every team makes over $200 million a year easily every year. So it would be better if there were more financial streams and obviously larger ones to the point where you actually are making that money. Obviously, the excess would be pocketed by the owner, not available
Right.
to you, but that's how it is in reality.
And Michael Vicks also asks for more insight into the development budget, and says the entire financial system needs an overhaul. So yeah, like it definitely does, but I do think marketing could be interesting. So what's your next one?
So the next thing I had is actually making the game easier for new people.
I have
By
something
adding,
similar. Keep going.
okay, so it's just I have 2 things. One is adding tutorials so that it's
Yeah.
in-game tutorials, not just the video
I
tutorials.
have a tutorial on my list.
Yeah, so you could do that one next if you want.
Alright, so keep going.
Alright, so my tutorials are just to help people be more easily introduced to the game, make it because the OTP has a lot of really high complexity things in it, and it would really help people learn the game more easily rather than just seeing all these numbers and then thinking, oh, what if I played this easier game? And the
Oh,
other thing I have is to add 3 different levels of complexity, a simple, a normal, and a hard, with the simple having very few elements involved and just helping people get introduced to the game essentially. The normal having the current level of complexity we have, maybe a little less, and then yeah,
Alex says
yeah,
Alex says that they're going to plan on having in-depth tutorials for Out of the Park 22.
that would be great.
And Michael Vick says that the financials are too complex to the point where you have to pay attention to it, but not too complex where it doesn't mimic in real life, and I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
So, do you have an idea for a tutorial? Because I have tutorial on my list, and I have something very specific in mind.
I don't have anything specific. I just had general ideas.
So I have an idea where like you probably you start up in a tutorial, and it's like a fixed tutorial where you are the GM of the Dodgers, specifically the Dodgers, because they have a lot of good players and they have a lot of money, and you receive email alerts from your assistant manager telling you, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, here's what it is and here's how to do it, throughout the course of the season. So like you start in the off season, all of your emails are like, please take a look at this player, please notice it, and then they explain like how to do certain things. When you get to the draft, the assistant manager explains how to do the draft for you, so just like that throughout the entire first season, and then at the end of the year, you're allowed to continue, but the tutorial ends.
All right, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And so Jamie wants game mechanics, like how coaches work, and yeah, Alex, we're thinking like walkthrough tutorial like in the game, because those are fun. Obviously, like we're thinking of things that could be, 10 years down the line. We're not like asking for anything in the next game or anything. Head coaches wouldn't jump from a head coaching job to a rookie job after getting fired. Yeah. Okay, should I do my next one then?
That's a good idea.
Okay, so I don't know how this would work at all. I just had this idea, so this is like totally unrealistic. But you know how you can play as the GM or the manager in the game?
Right.
I want to play as a scout. Where you go to
that
all.
would be interesting.
I don't know how you would get it to work, but like your GM and your manager tell you all of these players you have to scout, and like you have to like scout the draft, and I don't know, maybe there's some sort of like little mini game you have to do to figure out what the players' ratings are, but like then you also can like go into other countries to do international scouting discoveries. I don't know, it would be cool. I don't know how you would get it to work in the game, but why not?
I definitely think that could be a really cool idea.
Yeah. Meme Lord with the memes, yeah. And teams should be able to poach other teams' pitching, batting coaches to manager. Yeah. Did you all ever watch the Foolish Baseball tutorials? No. And I don't know if you did either.
I didn't watch it, no.
Right. So what's your next one on your list?
All right, my next one is a more in-depth player chemistry system. So right now what we have is essentially all your players have certain personalities that are very limited, and they all come together in a big pot to determine how happy your team is, essentially along with how much they're winning and how good your manager is. So what I want is more specific personality traits for your players, like is charitable, deals well with grumpy teammates, things like that, and have those contribute to interactions between players, not just as with the team as a whole. So in addition to the overall happiness system, I would like a chemistry system where guys get along and they have certain relations, like enemy, acquainted, friends, that kind of thing.
That seems pretty cool.
And it could make performance differences in things like your double play combos, adjacent hitters in the lineup, base running, and most importantly, of course, pitchers with their respective catchers.
Yes. I think that's a really cool idea. Like just playing more with the chemistry stuff. And like you could it makes like right now, oh yeah, we go after like leaders and captains, but it can make it so that you really have good reasons to target specific players.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So my next one is sort of related to what we're going to talk about later. And I would like a better rating system specifically with regard to position rating. Because, and here, let's just bring up, actually not Ian Anderson, we need, about Ozzy Albies, why not? So like, right now you can either set your overall and potential to numbers or stars, but it doesn't really matter because position rating, it's a combination of position rating and batting rating. And like someone could be a really, really good defender, but you may never look at them if their overall rating is really low and you're not searching all players for specific things. I think it would be maybe nice to have an overall both batting and hitting combo rating, and then one specifically for position rating, and then one also specifically for hitting. So like you have potential hitting, potential position, and potential overall. And you could sort by that, which would make it a lot easier to find like utility players when you're looking.
Yeah, that is a really good idea, and that is how the scouting system actually works too. So
Ooh, Alex likes this idea. That's a good sign. Just because like I know it's like one of the things that I know people, a way to divide overalls into sub-overall categories, because not all 2-star players are created equal. Some of them just suck all the way around, and then some of them actually are good at either hitting or position rating, but you're not going to see that if you're not going to click on them.
Yeah, just an example of that. I had a designated hitter in one of my games who is a top tier hitter, but I managed to get him in the second round of the draft back when he was already elite potential, and then I
Yeah.
signed him to 5 million a year for 10 years when he came up.
All right. So what's your next one?
All
Yes,
right, my next
catchers are a
one.
good example.
Yeah, catchers are a great example of that. My next one is increasing the GM interactivity overall. So that would include things like bartering your owner, which is something that all of us have been talking about a lot, where you
Yes.
can essentially ask your owner for more cash if you're trying to spend over your budget. Like if you're trying to spend over your budget signing a free agent, you get a little pop up that says ask owner for more money, and then you have a little conversation with them. And if you're successful, which would probably be dependent on how much money you've been making lately, how many times you've attempted to do this, and things like that, then you get the money you need to complete the action. And if not, then too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
Optional press conferences would be another really cool thing to add.
Ooh, that
Like,
sounds
I think they
cool.
have those in Football Manager, where you can just improve your fan interest potentially, uh, improve your team morale, things like that. Player meetings would also be really cool to add, where you can call a player meeting and attempt to help your guys out that way.
Yeah, not just get an email that it's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think, and this is sort of related to that, that like more interactive emails would be good because people just sit on their emails and they don't read them. Like, give us a reason with like interactive
Yeah, that's
stuff.
a good point.
But yeah, I like that idea, especially the press conferencing, because again, you can tie that into your like media and marketing as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so my next one is stylized historical and historical minor league logos. Now, I know that there's rights issues with a lot of the historical minor leagues and like Negro League teams with their logos. But one of the things that Out of the Park does is it'll you know how like you have the like logo creator like in Perfect Team where like it'll automatically generate one for you?
Right?
So, I think as many of us know, one of the downfalls of that is like sometimes they just don't look very good, or you have like letters like going out the sides of them. Which I think in the context of like Perfect Team, like it's kind of funny and like it's not a bad thing to keep in there. But when you're playing a historical sim, you kind of want your minors to have some logos. And I actually have this wonderful mod that's adds all the historical minor league logos. And while that's not really feasible due to rights issues for many of these teams, it would be quite nice, I think, if we could have some stylized alternatives for all of the historical teams, so that when you're launching your 1800 save, the Brooklyn Bridegroom's name isn't coming out of the generated logo. And
Yeah.
um,
I definitely think that when it comes to the aesthetic of the game, that's one of the few areas where it doesn't just excel. So adding things like that would go a long way
because like
to.
there are some stylized logos in the game already. Like if you make a team called the Bees or like the Blues or the Colonels, like a little icon thing would appear. So if you just have that, I mean, it would be a lot of work and like a lot of time for some graphic designers. But like if you add one of those for all of the historic teams and then just repeat them for teams with the same name, it would be very great. And then you can also download mods for people who want to use other ones. We need draft combine game like how Road to the Show has it before the MLB draft to see what random shows and prospects can do. That's a cool idea.
That's a good idea.
All right, what's your next one?
All right, my next one is a more advanced trading system. So we all love the AI trade proposals. They're our absolute favorites.
Oh yes, our
So,
favorites.
yeah, so my first one is to make those actually decent to consider more often, primarily by involving better players on both sides and making them more fair. Not obviously too good, because then it's more likely for you to get an exceptional deal where you didn't even have to search for it, but it would be nice to have them so that they're actually decent more often. The next thing is to separate competitive balanced draft picks from normal draft picks in the trade settings, because right now you either have them all or
Yes.
nothing.
Yes.
But in MLB, you can trade your competitive picks, but not your other picks. I've also got trading or making international amateur pool money tradable, because I believe they're available in $250,000 increments or something like that right now.
I don't know.
Making three team trades available would also be really cool, but I don't expect that for a while. But it would definitely be helpful to do that instead of just trade with one team and then turn around and trade that player to another team.
Oh my god, though, can you imagine the AI trade proposals with 3-team trades? It would be a nightmare. It would be so bad.
That would be really crazy.
It would be so funny, though.
That would be really funny.
Like, you get this really bad prospect from Team A and this mediocre position player from Team B, and you give your star player to Team A and a random prospect to Team B.
Exactly.
It would be so bad. But yeah, I know a lot of people want want an overhaul of the trading system. Okay, so
I don't necessarily want an overhaul, but I would like improvements.
Yes. Okay, so my next thing is sort of related to my last thing, kind of. When in historical mode, here you shouldn't be able to finish a trade by adding a minor leaguer who has 0 value.
Well, that's
that gets into scouting and the other team's scout, though.
And it's also to do with, okay, well, this trade is almost good enough for this, so let's just find one more thing to get a little bit more out of it, and then we would be willing to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about all the, like, number 30 prospects on a team that actually do get flipped in the real world.
Player to be named later.
Yep, player to be named later.
Oh, that's a good thing to add, player to be named later. Not on my list, but... Okay, so when you're in historical mode, you don't have access to the old stadiums. It's just the stadiums for the Major League, I think. There might be a couple of exceptions in there. But it's just the default park. Now, fortunately, we have mods to correct this. And after Teddy's 1,000th chat message about how Fenway Park did not look the way it does in 1940, I went and I added the historical mod pack, which allows you to put in the historical ballparks. I think, and like, I don't think this is an issue with Fenway, because Fenway has been the same park and Wrigley has been the same park for like 100 years. But I do think it would be pretty neat for you to have like an 1800 style one, for, like, let's say if you're playing in as the Boston Beaneaters in South End grounds, or like even old Yankee Stadium, or, you know, some of these older ballparks when you're playing in historical mode and you want to watch a game to see them. And that could be licensing issues too, but it would be nice to see.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Alright, what's your next one?
So my next one is changes to ratings. So the first thing I want is command added to not each pitch, but to the pitcher, because as we know, location is pretty important in getting your pitching effective. So I'm not sure exactly how that would affect a pitcher's performance, but it would be nice to see the rating added at some point. I would also like to see more advanced pitch sequencing and game calling from the catcher's spot. So that could be probably a 3rd catcher rating, since they only have 2 defensively.
Right.
I would also like to see stuff split up into... No, actually, never mind. I don't want that one. I would like to see more pitches, though. Yeah, I don't know. I thought I took that off, but apparently not. So I would like to see a eufus, a slurve, a churve, a palm ball, and potentially more pitches added to the game at some point. And I would also like arsenal sliders, which is basically where more diverse arsenals get better effects. So like if you're throwing all fastballs, that's probably not as effective if you're throwing a fastball, curveball, slider, and a screwball.
And Lobat says that he thinks Action PC baseball mods have dead ball stadiums and they could be used in other park. There are some dead ball stadium mods that exist, and I have them. But that's interesting to note. But speaking of pitches, though, you know what would be a really cool thing? Just
what?
off the bat, if like a 1% chance or something stupidly low for a pitcher to invent a new pitch and then have that be added to the game. I don't know what you would call it or how it would even be handled in the game.
Yeah, just generating the pitch names would be interesting, but probably much lower than 1%, but that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Or your pitching coaches might have that option as well.
Yeah. Okay. So my next thing is directly related to our stupid bingo games, and I've mentioned this before. When you are and I'll show you guys actually how this works on the stream. So when you are creating a very stupid bingo game and you have very low time, you have low effort and you have no time, sometimes it's cool to make teams play against each other, right? Well, you can't import 2020 teams when you're creating a fictional historical league. And I get why, but it makes it really hard to do like simulations, because when you try to import players, actually no, I don't. When you try to import players, like here, I'll show you. So let's say we want to import, actually no, I did this wrong. So let's do a new custom game. If we create a fictional league, and let's say we have this set up here. Oh, and Vitrudo says spitter for guys like Ed Walsh that threw it in real life. That would be cool. So if you switch to the historical team selection, you can't select 2020 as an option. Like you can scroll all the way here, but it stops at 2019. I would like for them to be able to add the current year with the opening day roster, or even like pulling from the updated rosters that they do throughout the year. So you can have your 2020 teams face off in a death match. Or have like a 2020 team face off against a team from an earlier day. Because when you import the players manually, they don't scale right to the other teams. Yeah, that's the next one. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I think that would be a good idea. It's just another tool that makes life a lot, I want to say easier, but yeah. Being able to do that is definitely something, I mean, considering how much people talk about this current year and how are this team going to do against a better team from historical ages, that would probably be something to look into.
And Rich told me he wants that as well. He mentioned that because I brought it up on the Out of the Park Now podcast, and he was like, yes. There's that, I guess. All right, what's your next one?
All right, my next one is, let's go with developing your ballpark in the area around it. So,
that's my next one too, stadium upgrading.
Yeah, this is something some other games have, where you can upgrade your stadium to improve capacity, change out the restaurants, things like that. So I think it would be pretty cool if we had that, and it could affect like the type of people you're bringing in, how happy your players are, things like that. That would be interesting.
Thank you for the follow, Pest.
Being able to develop the area around your ballpark and buy stuff out. We all know that there are a lot of teams that own the surrounding areas and have restaurants or bars or things like that.
Looking at you, Fenway.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
That whole area. Well, yeah, because also, but also there's like, I think you could make it again like through like emails. Upgrade the urinals at the Oakland Coliseum. Well, so
I
like
definitely agree with that.
no, like you could get like emails and stuff like, "Hey, we want to upgrade capacity," and you have the option to like put money in that, or again like the area around it, or different features, plaques and statues. And it would, one, for a short time increase your fan interest, and or if it's like a restaurant, it gives you a little buff to it. But also, if you're in like a historical sim and you just like, let's say you start in like 1970 and you turn off like all the expansion and stuff, so you're not playing in historical. Sometimes, or even if you are, sometimes your owner gives you an attendance goal that these old ballparks don't meet. And this is a way to get around that. You're literally bathtubs nailed to the wall at an angle? Oh no. I think we need just a random email about this in the game next cycle.
Yeah.
Fan
Yes,
leaves bad Yelp review based on Oakland Coliseum bathrooms.
I definitely think that the Coliseum needs some improvements.
Shout out to our list. What do we want in Out of the Park 22? The Oakland Coliseum upgraded. Okay, so my next thing is it technically okay. So I want an overhaul of the shortlist system, specifically involving the draft, because it sucks. You can shortlist players and like shortlist draft picks, but there's no good way when you're drafting to just like only look at your list and have the players disappear when they're drafted. And you can't really draft from the shortlist menu. I would like a special draft shortlist that appears during the draft. So like you can go when the pool is announced and go through the entire draft, shortlist everybody, set your scout on them, remove and add more players when necessary, and then when you're in the draft, you can just, instead of looking at the entire draft pool with filters, have a tab that's just your shortlist and pull from that. Because honestly, I don't look at the draft pool before I draft because there's no real point. There's too many of them and I can't shortlist the ones I want effectively. And set up a filter, but that's a lot of work, honestly. Yeah.
This is a complete side note, but I do that and I have a very tough time finding shortlists under the filter for whatever reason. Every time it takes me like 15 minutes and I don't know why.
Yeah. So it's like, again, it's technically already in the game, but I want it like not a filter. I just want it like a separate tab.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. There's a lot of things we could add stuff like that and it would make life much easier.
But in it, like, just, it's not, and it like wouldn't be under like your, like, it would be separate from your shortlist because it's a specific one for the draft.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like a draft board tab. Yeah. Okay. Do you have, how many more do you have left?
I have one more.
Okay, because I have 3 more. So do your, I guess I'll do 2 of them, and then do your 1. Hello, Capcom. Right. And Madden 2021 has a good system with that. Yeah, so by the way, like, just because this seems uneven, I was like, hey, I have 13 on my list, so you can go up to that many, and he chose not to, so. This is cosmetic ones. Lots of lovely people on the forums make beautiful uniform mods with alternate uniforms, and well, they're great, they're alternate uniforms. I would like another alternate uniform. Like, you know when you go to, like, here, I guess we'll use the Orioles for an example. If you go to, like, the Orioles and you look at their team logos and settings, and you look at their jerseys, how you have the home and the away, I'd like maybe 1 or 2 alternate jerseys and have them set so like you can do special events in your ballpark, again, to increase your fan interest, or in honor of like retired players, where you can set what alternate uniform you want to do, and that way when you watch the like games, if you're into that, you can see the alternate uniforms instead.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
And Capcom says Sundays. Yes, Sundays. Yeah, it's just because, like, we know that teams have alternate uniforms, and I'm not gonna lie, I want to see some games. Hello, Pest. I want to see some games where, you know, the Orioles wear their black uniforms, or maybe the Braves wear their dark blue ones. So I think
that
cool.
would be interesting.
And then this Blue Jays have Retro Fridays. Yes, and they have a special uniform for Canada Day. So, like, this is a great way to bring that in. My other one is something we touched on earlier, personal catchers for pitchers. I grew up in the mid-2000s watching, the late 90s and mid-2000s watching Tim Wakefield have a personal catcher for his knuckleball pitcher. Like, because he's a knuckleball pitcher, Doug Mirabelli caught for him for a very long time. It makes sense. Pitchers often prefer certain catchers, and in some cases, particularly if they're throwing strange pitches, they'll have a personal catcher. So I think it would be neat to, you know, put that in the game, and it would make certain catchers more valuable.
Yeah, that would be a good strategy setting. I definitely think. And on that note, I don't actually have this on my list, but it would be really cool if you could add a player rest system where it's staggered so that you're not just resting all of your guys on the same day, because that's when they get tired.
Yes. I agree with that. And you would agree that the game and visuals need to upgrade? Yeah, and uniforms would help, and V. Trudeau wants the ability to have the guys' names and numbers on the back. That, I'm okay with that not being in there, but I definitely can understand why people might want to. So what's your last one? Because mine is kind of tangent-like.
All right. Well, my last one is adding a research tree, basically for development and strategies and things like that. So you would first create a researcher position, which would be a new front office staff, and they would have different abilities in researching different types of things, essentially. So you could have player abilities and development, scouting, and other things. You could have your own separate budget, like scouting and player development, or financials, like we were talking about earlier. Yes. Your research tree would be available with a couple different areas of focus, like scouting, pitching, batting, fielding, and other things. Each researcher would have different abilities for each different type of research, and you could specialize them. You could research techniques such as spin reading for scouting, tunneling for pitching, plate discipline for batting, route reading for fielding, sliding into bases for base running and stuff like that. And you could have two different types of research, which are the things that you know exist and the things that you don't. When you are researching the things that you don't know exist, you're just having your researchers look into different aspects of the game and try to find new stuff. Every once in a while, something that is in the game pops up, and you complete your research to get something completely new, essentially.
Somebody's been playing a lot of strategy games. This is very like Civ like. I like it. And you know what would be really cool? You could like implement that in historical mode, where like it's not like the same sort of deal, but like you have time gated stuff too. So like if you hit the 1940s, certain options are available to you that are specific to the 1940s of things that they did back then. This would help with like pitching specifically, because every 10 years or so the way that we use pitchers changes. So if you're gated by like strategy, meaning you can always do stuff for your era, and maybe in some cases you're like you have a chance to be able to discover something from a later era, but it's like a really low chance, that could be really cool.
That would be really cool. And another thing you could do is, I was talking about having more pitches added to the game earlier. You could potentially have that be something you need to research, where you have to get, or you unlock different pitches being able to be used by your pitchers by researching them.
Yeah, and like the spitter was mentioned. You could unlock the spitter, and then you research the spitter and find out, nope, this is a bad idea. We're getting rid of it. All right, my last one, I think you can probably figure out what it is because I haven't mentioned it yet. But I would like... This is a bunch of things all meshed into one, and I'm going to lose half my viewers, but I'm going to go on it anyway. We need more female representation in this game. For starters, if you set your gender to female, the pronouns do not reflect that in your emails, which is not cool. And beyond that, women played baseball in the 40s. So, like, we should totally have the all-women's baseball league and female players as an option. I think a lot of people are in on this, right? Like, don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's the only reason I did not include it on my list is because
You
I
knew
was
I was
like
gonna
99% sure you were going to put it on.
And it's really sad. I was looking on the forums yesterday, and I was looking for something else, and I searched, and one of the things that came up was a female fan saying that she wanted women included. And I didn't read the whole thing, but it was about 10 pages long of people just dismissing her and telling her it was unrealistic and could never happen. And I think that that comes from a place of extreme privilege and silliness, because, yeah, we want to tout that Out of the Park is, realistic and able to simulate stats, but it's also a game. Women, and myself included, at least in my lifetime, we never got the opportunity to play baseball. We were excluded from it. Why should I have to be shamed in a fictional universe I create where I can't even make, a lot of players, sort of like in MLB The Show, will make players based on themselves and put them in. Why do I not get that opportunity? And yeah, anything to expand the audience will be much appreciated. And yeah, I think Out of the Park is working on this, but I mean, I feel like it does need to be said more, because if we want to impact change, we have to, we as consumers have to be like, yeah, we want this. And yeah, I mean, that's progress on Saturdays. But it just bothers me, and like sometimes when I've seen it being brought up, it's always the same thing. Oh, I want the developers to work on other things that are more important. It's like, really? Really? You don't think that this is important? If you're like, women played baseball, you can't get around it. And yeah, there's concerns like biologically, like, oh, they would be different. Who cares? It's a game. It doesn't have to be realistic. Make it a setting that you can turn on and off. Like, it's no need to get in a tizzy about it. And your single player game has several female players stuck with male faces for them? Yeah. There's a female face gen pack, though. I do know that. I don't know if you have anything to add on that. Oh, thank you, CFed, for the follow.
Pretty much the only thing I would add to that is that should pretty much be the number 1 priority, at least in my opinion, in terms of things that should be added to the game going forwards.
I think that there's a lot of people that are starting to agree with you on that, because if you want the game to grow, particularly if you want more women to play the game, you need to add more inclusion, specifically with women, because they're not really going to buy it in most cases if they can't do what they want. Can you imagine an entire, like, fictional gender-bent league? That would be kind of cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that concludes our stuff we want to see added to the game section. And I think all of you guys in the chat have some really cool suggestions, too. My favorite is the Oakland Coliseum.
Yes, I agree with that.
But now we're going to move on to the second part, where we are going to teach you how to play this game. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, Mushroom, so you can see.
All right.
And we are going to go through position by position and show you a good, like a really good, a decent, and a terrible option for each position based on defensive position rating, so you know what you're looking at when you're looking at players. And, oh, you're just in time for the tutorial section. I rock this. We're just about to start it. And bear in mind, there's a lot of things that go into constructing a team and deciding who you want as your position player for positions. The purpose of this is just to show you and teach you what you're looking at with regards to position ability. There are certain positions where you may want to sacrifice defense or offense, and that's complicated and we're not getting into it. Alright, so OTP Meme Lord wants you to enlighten us about catcher ability. So do you want to start with catchers?
I'd imagine we would start with catcher.
They're kind of the odd duck out, so I think it makes sense to start with them too. So we're going to and we've already gone ahead and picked players ahead of time that we want to show you. So we will do DH. We have that on the list. But we have picked players ahead of time, and we went through, and how long do you think we spent picking players? Just so they get an idea.
I have no idea.
I think we spent like probably an hour doing this because we wanted specific players to illustrate certain points, but by no means are these guys the be-all, end-all for each of the categories that we're telling you. We just thought that they were good examples for specific reasons. Alright, so we're going to start with catcher, and the first catcher we're going to look at is Christian Vasquez, while Sergeant Mushroom, who recently did a thing all on catchers, and you can post that in the chat if you want, is going to tell us all about catchers.
Okay, so you've got Vasquez up right now. As you can see, he's got both a really high ability and a really high arm. So through simulation modules, I found that you are going to get approximately 6+ wins by having a really high ability catcher. So if you have an 80 grade catcher ability guy, that's going to be approximately 6 more wins than an absolutely average guy. Obviously, that offsets pretty much any offensive ability that you're going to get with your catcher, so it's completely 100% the most important thing you can do. Catcher arm is actually really important as well. While individual base running doesn't really make a huge difference, the catcher is, of course, dealing with every single base runner, and it adds up, so his arm is going to be worth about 3 wins to you. It's half as valuable as the catcher ability, but it's still really darn valuable. So a guy like Vasquez with really high ability and arm makes him extremely valuable behind the dish.
And we should say that catcher ability is basically the ability, like, this is stupid, but in this game it's the ability to catch and like frame, and arm is how well they can throw with somebody stealing. For the most. So, and there's Mushroom's whole video on catchers. So yeah, when you're looking at catchers, and there are some people that like choose to have more offensive catchers, but for right now, catchers, they're pretty obvious to pick out because they say catcher and they have catcher position rating. So when you're drafting or when you're looking at players in trades or in the minors, you're going to know who's the catcher just because they say catcher for the most part. Alright, so we are now going to look at Jacob Stallings as an example of a decent catcher. And I don't know if you want to go on about Stallings. Catchers are really your thing. So.
Alright, yeah, I will do Stallings as well. So he's got a lower ability and a lower arm as well. They are about average. His ability is still slightly above average, so he's not a bad catcher, His arm is slightly above average. He's probably going to be worth 2 wins, maybe a little bit more behind the plate defensively. He's not an ideal catcher, but if you really are in an emergency, nobody's available with a high ability or arm, somebody like this is not terrible to turn to.
All right, and our last catcher is Zach Collins, who, as you can see, can't really catch. He is in this save.
Yeah, I see him as more of a first baseman, honestly, with that 40 grade first base defense, simply because he is so bad. When you have below average catcher ability, you immediately start seeing huge performance drop offs by your pitchers. So I think it's absolutely unacceptable to have anybody really below 65 grade catcher ability catching for you. But that 40 is just on a whole new level of completely terrible. If you have somebody like this behind the plate, you could definitely expect really poor pitching performance.
Yeah. And yes, Radio Rich G is not Rich Grisham, but he's been streaming this game recently, so you guys should check him out because he's a lot of fun. Okay, what position do you think makes sense next? Should we go to the infield? Should we do first base?
I think we should start with first base and just work our way across.
All right, we'll work our way around the diamond then. Killed your stream to watch this? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry you were streaming. Yeah, that's what the tradition wants us to think. Okay. So first base is kind of known for just being like, you can throw anyone there, and like, that's kind of true. You can really just throw people at first base, but we're specifically looking at this for like defensive first baseman in this case, and I rock this says Cal Raleigh is Jacob Stallings but with a bat. Sorry. And you guys can ask questions, like if you're getting confused or have specific questions, like feel free to ask and we'll answer them. So do you agree about like that with first baseman, that like you can really sort of just stick people there?
As long as they aren't too bad, yes, you can stick them there and it won't affect pretty much anything on your team.
Okay, so Jamie wants to know what position rating means and what it's worth, and how does it contribute. Position rating is how good your player is able to play a position, and it looks at all of the, so like for example, if we look at the ratings here, just for Jacob Stallings as an example, it takes a look at the range, error and arm, or turn double play, or ability and arm for catcher, and grades that for a position rating, for the most part. Anything else you want to add on that?
Position rating is just how out-of-the-park baseball combines your field outfielder catcher ratings, your training, and if you have handiness, that for second, third, and shortstop, and gives you a rough idea of how effective that person is going to be fielding. Also, height for first base. It's not 100% accurate, but gives you a rough idea of how good that person is going to be defensively at their respective position.
And hello, McTaters. Alright, so we're going to do first baseman. We picked Matt Olson for a really good first baseman. So let's go over what these infield stuff mean. So like infield range is movement around the infield. So it's the ability of a player to effectively move throughout the infield to make plays. Do you want to take infield error?
Infield error is essentially how often they are going to successfully make a play once they reach the ball rather than boot it around.
Will Cubs, we just did catcher and we are moving around the diamond. So you haven't missed much. Infield arm is how well a player can throw. So how well they can throw within the infield. And I guess you can take turn double play.
Turn double plays is how likely they are to successfully convert a double play when they have got the ball and there is a base runner behind them where they can complete a force out.
Yeah, yes, and OTP meme lord, yes. Defensive ratings don't always translate to position ratings. Mushroom here was a stickler for this. We picked, all of the players we're showing you right now are fully trained to be, just so you are not confused. So here's Matt Olson, and as you can see, he's a really good first baseman because he doesn't need to move a lot. He has decent error. His arm is okay, and he doesn't have to turn any double plays because he's sitting at first. So he can just park there, and he's 6'5", he's tall. So he can just park there, catch the balls, and, throw them to the second baseman when necessary. I think that's a fair assessment of Matt Olson.
Yeah, pretty much. In general, what you're looking for improving your first baseman is pretty much just the error and height. Once you get past a very low point on the range, it's not going to matter much at all, and the turn double plays doesn't really affect their defensive ability, period.
Yeah, there's a reason why you can just stick anyone at first base for the most part, and why traditionally it's a hitting position in real life. Like, you can even see with Matt Olson, he's a hitter. With his projections. Okay, so our decent one that we want is Mitch Moreland on the Padres, and you can see his range. He looks very similar if you look at his ratings here. The only reason I think why he isn't as good is his range is a little lower, his error is a little lower, but he does have a better arm.
He's shorter.
And he's shorter. So he's not as good. But like somebody with like this build is totally a fine first baseman and will bring you success. Michael Vick wants to know what our thoughts are on how related the ratings are. You go first.
Do you mean like how the ratings affect each other, or how they work for each individual position?
And yes, Bull Cubs. First base height does make a difference. I personally don't pay attention to height at first base, but height is definitely reflected within the defensive ratings for first base. So like you can totally ignore height and still have a fine first baseman.
So I actually am doing an experiment right now on how different ratings affect infield defense. I will quickly share the data I've collected so far for first base height. And so that will tell you specific height is going to be in terms of determining your success.
And also, he wants to know how they impact each other, the ratings.
Okay, so in general, higher range means that you're going to be attempting more plays. So the higher your range is, the more important your error is. Same goes, pretty much the higher your ratings are, the better it is to have higher ratings in every other category. But it's pretty much just looking at individual ratings, because it's not, the interconnectedness of the ratings isn't going to make too much of a difference.
Yeah, and once it takes a little practice, but once you get to a certain point, you're able to look at a player's defensive ratings. We're like, oh, they need to play this position. But also think about it. If you're lost and confused and you're like, I have no idea where I'm supposed to play this player, think about the stats and think about what you value in those players in real life. So if you think about your real life first baseman on your team, well, you expect he's not going to move a lot. You expect that he probably isn't going to get a lot of errors because he needs to catch the balls coming to him. He's not going to have to throw very far, but he still needs to be able to throw decently, and he doesn't really need to be doing any double plays. And you sort of get this sort of picture with the defensive ratings when you're looking at them in real life versus the game. It's always helpful to bring up the stats of your favorite first baseman or whatever position player it is as a reference. Which, I don't know if you do that.
Not really,
Not
but
really. Well, you're at the
I
point where
have
you
a
don't need to.
yeah, I have a really strange way of going through things.
Okay, so we also picked a pretty bad first baseman who's Vogelbach. And he's mostly here just because he sucks at everything. He's got... You want to go through this one?
So, Vogelbach, it's pretty hard to be completely awful at first base, but he's about as close as you can get. And yes, he is actually fully trained. He's 6 foot, so his height isn't hurting him too much, but he certainly isn't getting any help from it. His range is actually so low that it's at the point where it's severely harming his ability to make plays. His error is low enough that he's going to be bobbling several balls across the point of ear, and that's going to hurt him. And his arm is not ideal either, so if he does need to make any throws across the diamond, it's going to be tricky for him.
And Iraq, this does bring up a good point. If you're playing in the NL and you do not have the DH, you're probably putting a hitter at first base.
Absolutely. Hitters go to first base and left field in the NL.
There's a reason.
And to some extent in the AL.
There's a reason the Cubs traded him. But yeah, so like if I saw somebody like this, just in general, specifically Daniel Vogelbach, and I saw this, I'd be like, hard pass, I'm not taking you on my team.
For the record, Vogelbach is the only player this bad defensively in the MLB ratings-wise.
Yeah, we looked. Okay, so
the
now...
only player comparable is Alvarez, right? And he's not fully trained at first base.
Alright, so... Pujols? We can bring up Pujols. Pujols is a DH sometimes. I think he was being played as a DH. You can see though that Pujols is taller as well, which is boosting his rating. And Pujols is typically played by the Angels in real life as a DH and not as a first baseman. So yeah, they were nice to him. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about second baseman, and we're going to talk about DJ LeMahieu, who currently isn't on a team. So your second baseman, when you think about second base, you need your second baseman to, obviously, compared to your first baseman, make double plays. So they need to have at least an okay double play rating, although usually the ball is being thrown to them. And you need your second baseman to move around on the infield a little to go to go into the deep infield to get, shallow outfield balls. You need them to move around with your shortstop to make double plays. You want them to not get a lot of errors because that can cause runs to score because second base is scoring position. You want them to have an okay arm as well so that they can throw to both first and to third, but it doesn't have to be like overly massively overpowered. And height helps, I think, for second base too.
No, height only affects first base.
Okay, it only helps for first base. Alright, so what do you have to add on second baseman?
So for second base, generally you want a very high turn double play. Second base is going to be where most of your double plays are turned. Your shortstop's going to have a few, but double plays are probably, 60 to 65% approximately is what I'd estimate for second base.
Yeah.
So your error range and turn double plays are all important, but you can live with either error or turn double plays being a little lower.
But not both.
Ideally, yeah, like here on LeMahieu, yeah, his turn double play is a little low, and he's still one of the best second basemen in the game.
Yes.
So, your arm can be as low as 35 or 30, generally, since you're not making super long throws to first base. But overall, you really do want your second baseman to be a fairly well-rounded fielder who's probably just a slightly worse shortstop.
Yeah, pretty much, and we're gonna probably hit shortstop last in the infield, but generally, when you're looking at your second baseman, it's probably, you're looking at them in the lens of, this is not good enough to be a shortstop. And that's where you stick a lot of your. That's how you determine it. Would you agree on that?
I agree. There's, in general, it's either going to be a pure second baseman or a shortstop who's simply not good enough for the position.
Yes. Yeah, second base equals shortstop with no arm, and third base equals shortstop with low range.
Exactly,
yes. And we will get into that more. And you had a generated Indie League free agent. Second base would pretty much maxed out defensive ratings, except for 30 arm. We could not put him anywhere else. Yeah, sometimes that happens. Alright, so we're going to talk about your average second baseman, and that would be Jonathan Scope. Who was also, I think, not really on a team. Now, you can see here that Scope is okay at range and arm and double play, but his error is low. And because he doesn't have a high error or a high turn double play, he's a worse second baseman. Although he is well liked, apparently. That doesn't contribute, though, right?
No, I don't think that improves.
Okay. Alright, so would you like to talk about our bad second baseman, Jose Altuve?
Yeah, Altuve is your nightmare scenario fielder. He's not tall enough for first base. As you can see, he's 5'6", and he does not have the defensive ratings to be good anywhere else. So he's got average range, error, and turn double plays, which are the contributing factors to second base, and average does not cut it. Obviously, with first base and shortstop contributing to turn double play average, you are going to see lower than you need. His arm is fine, but you really do need to see some solid, at least range and turn double plays to be effective.
So Altuve does have outfield ratings, but I don't think he's trained there. Like, he's not showing a rating. We can go into the editor and take a look.
He'd probably be best in left field. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have any training anywhere else.
No.
So you could technically play him in left. I'd put him in left. Or DH him. But yeah, I wouldn't do much. Alright, let's talk about third baseman. We're gonna talk about Matt Chapman. Would you like to discuss third baseman?
Yeah, sure. So at third base, generally everything matters except for turn double plays, since you're not going to be doing that much at third. Generally speaking, the arm is the champion's thing for third baseman. You can't have a low arm, but after you get past a certain point, it doesn't necessarily matter as much. Your range and error are going to be pretty important. Range is not nearly as important as it is at shortstop or second base, but it's still nice to have, and your error is going to be your deciding factor. For the higher it gets, the better you are overall.
And just a note on the arm, when you think about third basemen, they often have to make plays to first base when you have ground balls, which is why their arm needs to be so overpowered.
Yeah.
Captain America, I see OT Meme Lord is happy about our athletics choices. Alright, so here is a decent third baseman, and that would be Raphael Devers. And as you can see, Devers is just basically a worse Chapman. His ratings are just lower. So he has lower range, he has lower error, lower arm, and not very good double play. But he's workable. You can put him at third base and be fine. And then our really bad third baseman is Justin Turner. Would you
Good old Red Turn 2.
Red Turn 2. Would you like to discuss Justin Turner and in both position rating and conspiracy?
Alright, so firstly, with his defensive rating, as you can see, his arm is significantly, well, it's not lower significantly than Devers, but it's much lower than Chapman's. It's not quite horrible, but it's at the point where he's going to be pretty questionable at making some kind of routine ground balls to shallow third base. his range is going to prohibit him from adding much value on the left side of your infield, and his error is not ideal either for third base. So you're essentially just looking at a guy who overall is not quite good enough to play third base. And as far as the conspiracy, so there is how exactly did I put it? So Justin Turner is a communist agent who came to the MLB to spread coronavirus to everybody, and that is why he celebrated on the field after the Dodgers won the World Series. He was put there to give the Rays COVID and skew the World Series in favor of the Dodgers. So everyone
And,
had COVID and they just never got tested. That's the conspiracy.
and you also wanted to point out that he was from Russia and possibly connected to the Red Hat conspiracy, although it sounds like you're doing more investigation on that front.
I'm still working on that, yes, but he is a communist agent.
It's in the name, Red Turn 2, yes.
Exactly.
Stay tuned next week. We'll have more info on whether or not he's connected to the Red Hat conspiracy. We also should point out, though, that a couple months ago I predicted a scandal within the Dodgers organization, and Mushroom seems to be thinking that this is the scandal.
Oh, there's probably multiple scandals. I mean, it's the Dodgers.
Okay, so Bull Cubs asks, how much does turn double play matter on third base? And OGP Meme Alert says not at all. Yes.
It matters, but it's very little. So you're going to see the best third baseman turn probably 5 to 10 double plays a year. So if they miss a couple, that's not going to kill you.
And Iraklis says that you would take that defense if you had that offense all day on Devers. And Devers is a weird case because we looked in the editor and he's apparently fully trained at third base, but I think that's probably going to change in the next game because he almost certainly is not fully trained at third base in real life, if you've ever seen him play. And yeah, he has high potential. And it's in the name, Red Turn 2.
So Justin Turner's actual nickname is the Red Menace, which is he's the Red Communist Menace.
Alright. And yes, Michael Vick, his actions were inexcusable. And
I think you mean Diamondbacks fan, I rock this.
So you are not a Dodgers fan.
I'm definitely not a Dodgers fan. I'm the opposite of a Dodgers fan.
Alright. So now we're going to talk shortstops, which is basically what you're going to be looking at for your infield first. You're going to be looking at this and being like, is this a shortstop? No. What position do they play? Let's look at Francisco Lindor. Now, for your shortstops, you just want everything maxed, basically. Because your shortstop needs to have high range because they need to move around the infield, although you can sacrifice that a little, I think. You want them to have really good error rating so that they're not missing balls. You want them to have a good arm because they need to be able to throw all the way around the infield. And you want them to have a decent double play rating because they're usually the ones involved with double plays from second to first, where they're picking up the ball and throwing it to the second baseman, or in cases from third to second, they're usually the ones covering second base. So the higher all of their ratings, the better. And you can see Lindor here is high in everything. Anything you wanna add on that?
Yeah, I'll say that the range is by far the most important rating at shortstop.
Yes.
And error is probably second, but I would say arm and turn double play do still need to be high.
We all know Lindor is super high. Yeah, I would never take a shortstop who didn't have a range lower than 65. Provided that I was given that opportunity. Why can't you delete your own messages? Don't know. But yeah, you want your range to be really high. Alright, would you like to discuss our mediocre shortstop, Xander Bogaerts?
So as you can see, Bogaerts still has the arm and error to play shortstop, but he's not going to turn double plays like he'd like. And the most important thing here is that his range is very subpar. you definitely cannot be running 55 grade range at shortstop if you can avoid it. I mean, I think Bogarts would be an excellent third baseman, but I don't see him working out that great at short.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically it. And then finally, our really bad shortstop would be our hottest guy on the Nationals, Trey Turner, who is a second baseman. I mean, he doesn't have the range, he doesn't have the error, and because of that, he really shouldn't be playing shortstop. He's 45 grade. If he had higher range and error, I think it would work. But
I agree.
But he's really fast, so like, yay. Use him as a pinch runner.
He's a leadoff man.
Yeah. You can confirm that catchers can throw lefty, I rock this. Yes, they can. Mention righty versus lefty at shortstop and third base. Yes. So your handedness matters. Do you want to elaborate, Mushroom?
Essentially, you cannot be a left-handed player and get defensive ratings at second base, shortstop, or third base. So don't think you can trade up guys at positions if they're left-handed on the left side of the infield or second base, because it is pretty rare in the MLB.
I would say that, like...
So, for an example of this, Evan White is absolutely capable of playing third base by his defensive ratings.
We'll look at Evan White.
But you can't train him up there because he throws left-handed, I believe.
Yes. And I definitely think one of the most common questions we see is not just where do I play this player, which I would say that we both get probably like 5 times a week, but also why is my third baseman playing at shortstop, or why is my shortstop playing at third base, and why is my coach not doing anything about it? And the answer is always, they're left-handed. Or somebody on your roster is left-handed that's being put in the position. Would you say that we get that a lot?
I'd say that's pretty common.
Yeah, it's a really common thing that gets asked. So that is something to pay attention to. But again, if you mess up and you try to train them there and it isn't working and you know you've put them there, it won't let you do it. So you're not going to accidentally be putting a player in a position where they can't play because the game doesn't let you. Unless you force them. I think if you force them to start there, it'll do it, but they won't get position rating for it. The last MLB player to play infield as a lefty was Rizzo, if you recall. And it wasn't long term. Yeah.
Jake Lamb he fields left-handed, and he played third base for a long time. I think he still played third base with the A's this year, so.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about the outfield, where I would say that you are better at infields, and I'm better at outfield, I think, when it comes to looking at position ratings. So do we want to start with left field?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so left fielders, there's a million of them, because there's another saying like, oh, you can stick anybody in left field, which is kind of true. Really depends on your ballpark. Left fielders are your outfielders who don't have high stats in a lot of things. So, for example, here we have Jock Peterson, who's probably the best left fielder in the game. Now, there's 3 components to outfield ratings. The first is range, second is error, and the third is arm. Outfield range is your ability to move throughout the outfield. Outfield error is obviously the rate at which you commit errors. And arm is how far you can throw. And this is critical in the outfield because you need to be able to throw the ball all the way home sometimes. So left fielders typically are not moving out of left field and don't have a huge amount of range. And this is because in many ballparks, not all ballparks, but many of them, left field is the shallowest section of the outfield. That doesn't mean it isn't deep, it just means compared to center and right, it is shallower. Left fielders should have a decent amount of error because you don't want them dropping balls, obviously. And their arm doesn't, just by the nature of the way that it's played, their arm doesn't need to be like too high. Like 50 is really good, but you can sometimes get away with like something lower than that because left fielders are not usually throwing the ball very far. They're usually throwing it to the third baseman or the shortstop, and it goes from there. Would you agree so far?
One thing I would generally say that the error doesn't necessarily need to be that high for any of the 3 outfield positions. It's just nice to have.
It's nice to have. You don't need the error to be high, but like you do. It's nice to have decent error, and you'll have a more successful outfielder if their outfield error is higher. Yes, no crossfield throws. They play left because you need a super good arm in right field. We will get to right field. So yeah, again, left field is another position where you're probably going to be sticking your guy that doesn't play in the outfield but doesn't play the other 2 positions. So we can see Jock Peterson here because he has higher error and higher arm for a position that doesn't really need that as much, and range as well. He's a really good left fielder. So what does your standard middle of the road left fielder look like? Well, let's take a look at Kyle Schwarber. Jamie asks, does handiness matter in left field?
No, handiness does not affect your outfield at all.
No. So would you like to discuss Kyle Schwarber?
So as you can see, Schwarber's primary handicap here is his lower range. As you can see, 45 range and still having 50 defense in left field, you clearly don't need that much range at all or really anything to competently play left. His average error and arm will keep him somewhat afloat, so he should still be able to make plays. He's just not going to be exceptional. He's just going to be there.
Yeah, and it's important to note when you're looking for left fielders, there's a lot of left fielders because of the nature of this. Like, he's okay at left field, and there's a lot of guys out there that are like him. And it actually took some trouble for us to find a bad left fielder, but we found one, Shin-Soo Choo, who, even though he's bad, he can still sort of do it. Just all of his stats are lower, so his fielding rating is lower. So you could put a 40 grade overall in your left field and not... Yeah, they're not going to be the greatest fielder, but I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. Do you agree?
I agree. Pretty much, if you have a good enough hitter, it is fine to stick them in left field with subpar defense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's why you see players like Ted Williams in left field. Or Jorge Soler. Alright.
Well, isn't Jorge Soler a right fielder, though?
We will talk about Soler later. But yeah, you don't want to distract him from stream, but you're watching the highlights on YouTube and he's throwing with his right hand. Yes.
I'm pretty sure he fields left-handed, but I could be totally wrong.
Yeah. Like I said, I rock this. We will talk about Soler later. So now we're going to move on to center field, which is probably the most complicated outfield position. Would you agree? In terms of...
Not really. I think it's one-dimensional.
You think I just mean like in regards to when you're looking at your outfield ratings. So Billy Hamilton, not that one, is actually a really great center fielder. Would you like to discuss?
So the biggest thing that matters, and pretty much the only thing you're going to be looking at for your center fielder, is their range. Making plays in the outfield you're going to see a great increase in how many outs you can produce as a center fielder with higher range. Obviously, this is true of your other two outfield positions as well, but it is the most important center field. His high error helps him a lot too. He's not going to drop many balls, so he's going to convert more outs than your average 75 grade range center fielder. And the subpar arm is all right because, again, like your left fielder, you're likely just throwing to a cutoff man. So just make the plays and then let your infielders do the rest.
Yes, and one of the things that Out of the Park, and this is important for the outfield, I think more so than the infield, one of the things that Out of the Park doesn't really do very well is the differences in how different ballparks play realistically. There are definitely certain ballparks where you would want an outfielder with, like a center fielder with really great arm, but that's not reflected in the game. And you're saying this as someone who's seen to attempt him to field. Yeah, random question. Oh yeah, and Michael, like, don't sweat about like distractions. If we didn't want people contributing or asking things or saying stuff, we wouldn't have allowed you guys to do it this way. We would have just made a video.
And after the check, Jake Lamb does throw right-handed, so I apologize. I have no idea why I thought he threw left.
A random question about arm. Is it the only thing that is put into calculating the throwing it out at a runner? I found that Jake Fraley was throwing tons of people out, but he had an average arm. Let's look at Jake Fraley.
So height has something to do with it for the first base side of things. So if you have a tall first baseman, that'll help a little bit. And I think the first baseman's error does as well. Range might help a little bit, but I'm not totally sure about that, like getting to the ball faster, and then that obviously would.
So he's a left fielder. He's a left fielder listed here too, so he's not throwing it very far, I think.
If it's outfield or catcher, it could just be sample size because you're not seeing them throw too many people out over the course of a season.
Okay, so now to talk about the most average of center fielders, Mike Trout, who his range is 65, which is about average, and that's really the thing we're looking at. His error is high, which is nice, and his arm is average. He's 60, so he's not bad. He's a good person to have in center field. But his range is definitely making it so he can't really move as far in the outfield. I would say he's okay. In general, I won't take a center fielder that has below a 65 in their outfield range. So he's acceptable, but he's on the low end of acceptable for me.
For me, Trout is definitely the guy you stick in center field if you don't have a better fielder. He can handle it, but he is better suited for one of the corners. As you can see, he's got actually a better arm significantly than Hamilton and only slightly lower error. So the range is legitimately a 10 range difference, accounting for a 10-15 position change.
He also formed a solid bond with local fans, which is important. And he just hits like crazy. Like, honestly, if Mike Trout is hitting like that and you don't have the DH, just stick him in center. All right, and our bad center fielder, AJ Pollock. Oh, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So again, Pollock is only slightly worse than Trout in his error and arm, but the range, the 5 difference in range, like once you drop from a 65 to a 60, you completely see your guys tumble. It doesn't matter how high your arm and error are. You are probably getting stuck in a corner if you have less than 65 range.
This guy would be... He's listed as a center fielder, but you can see he plays better in left. Just from his ratings here. Oh, look,
For the record, I rock this. I think that Pollock is a much better fielder than they give him credit for in the game. He just happens to be rated badly.
And I think we do need to mention there's a lot of players in this game that are not rated well.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is actually better ratings because this save is the one this is my quick start from the final day of the season. I made this on the 28th after all the games had been finished. And these are more updated than when you do a traditional live start at the beginning of 2020. So these are actually somewhat better than what they were, but they're still not great in many cases.
Well, for those who don't know, by the way, AJ Pollock has actually shamed the Diamondbacks with the Dodgers media. So there is actually some very serious bad blood there, and he's been yelled at when he returns to Arizona.
All right, so on to right field, our last of the position players, not including DH. So there's this guy named Mookie Betts, who's the greatest right fielder in the game, and the most important thing for your right fielder is their arm, because your right field can often be quite deep, and your right fielder is going to have to throw all the way across the diamond to get to the second baseman, to get to the third baseman, to throw it home. And because they're throwing diagonally a lot of times, your infielders, like your second baseman and your shortstop, are probably not going to be able to catch the ball. So they have to be able to throw very far, pretty accurately. And obviously, you want them to have decent range so they can move around the outfield, and their error to be high, ideally. You have anything to say else about that?
I would still put range above arm in right field. I wouldn't say it's quite as huge a difference as it is for the other two positions. But like you were talking about how the right field is generally the deepest position in the outfield, you still do need to be able to move around and make plays.
And that's gonna definitely be personal preference and what works for you. There's plenty of people that think and feel that higher range than arm in their right field works better for them. I find with the way that I play, higher arm as opposed to range works better. And there's not really a right answer with that one. And for a lot of the outfield, there's a lot of preference in there. Says the Boston fan. Well, Mookie Betts is, like, if you look stat-wise, he's among the best, and we wanted to pick somebody everyone would have heard of. So there's no right answers, just wrong answers. So would you like to talk about our mediocre option, Teoscar Hernandez, whose outfield abilities are definitely inflated in this game?
Oh yeah, definitely. So as you can see, he's got average air, range, and arm, which is good enough to play either corner, but really not good enough to excel in right. His range and arm are really the two things you'd like to see higher for a right fielder. He's going to make plays, but not as many as you want, and he can't really throw the ball well enough to make those tough plays at third and home that you need your guy to do.
See, he's a better left fielder. And Bull Cubs, but like if you look at other stadiums, right, and again, this is something that Out of the Park does not do very accurately. There are a number of stadiums where right field is the deeper part, and then there's some stadiums, not many, but a few, where left field is the deepest part of the outfield, and then there's a number of them where center field is. But in this game in general, right field seems to be dealt with within the game engine as being deeper than the other parts of the outfield, from what I've observed. And do you agree with that?
Center field is usually deeper than right field, I think. I would have to check to make
we should
and
check.
It's definitely deeper than left.
Yeah, it's deeper than left.
It could also depend on which division you're in and which teams you're playing more often.
Yes, Fenway is the most extreme for right field. Yes. But we should probably test that. But also when you're looking at your center fielders and your right fielders, depending on your playing style, your corner outfielders for your left field and your right field are not going to look the same anyway. So, does pitching defense mean anything? So we have a note here for pitching. Don't worry about it. Is literally what I've written down. So don't worry about it. If people want, we can get Skep back at another point specifically to talk about pitchers. So please put a 1 in the chat if you would like that. And Skep says, why are there so many balks? Because there are. Do you have any thoughts about pitcher defense? Or from don't worry about it?
Generally, your pitchers, honestly, your pitchers are going to be making very few plays. Just, it doesn't matter if the ball goes to your other infielders.
Yes, I mean Mushroom, I'm sorry.
Yeah. In general, just worry about your pitcher's pitching ability. Don't worry so much about their defense at all. Don't worry too much about their hold runners. Don't worry too much about their stamina, although those are a little important. But just worry about their control, worry about their movement, and worry about their pitch quality.
But yeah, we can definitely... Would you be interested in coming back at some point to do pitchers? Because they're very different.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so we can do that at some point in the future. All right, so now our really bad right fielder, Castellanos, hits a line drive. It'll be a 4-0 ball game. He's the worst right fielder in the game. Like, he's so
by
bad.
A long shot,
by
too.
a long shot. And yes, I rock this. The difference is that the throw to third is not so far. But yeah, so he's really bad because he has no range. His error is poor and his arm is poor. He is not a right fielder, and he's fully trained. We looked.
Yeah, Castellanos is really a left fielder.
He's a left fielder or a DH. Like, he's bad. Don't do this. Don't put this guy. Even worse than Cruz. We can bring up Cruz to look at.
I don't think Cruz is fully trained, which is why we ended up not using him.
Yeah, I believe so. We can check. I also don't know if they're playing him as a right field.
No.
Yeah, he's not fully trained.
And that's why we didn't use JD Martinez as well, because I wanted to, but yeah.
Well, so we also have DH on here, and the reason why we couldn't use JD Martinez is because we're solely looking at this game. We'll come back to JD Martinez, but we're going to briefly talk about DH because we have to include them. And Cruz is first here on our list, actually, for good DHing, because he can't field for crap. Your DH needs to be good at hitting. And if there are good DHs, focus only on hitting and don't field. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would say in general, your DH is either somebody who cannot field or your worst fielder if everybody on your team fields well.
Yes. And why not keep very big of attempts to preserve your ERA? Why not? So, as middle of the road, DH would be Jorge Soler. It's not Carlos Soler, Jorge Soler.
I think he would be really great.
And Soler is here because he's not a great... He's a hitter, and again, if people are interested, we can talk about hitting another time. But he's not a great fielder, but you could field him if you absolutely needed to. So he's a decent DH. Not enough home run power and accurate. Yeah, a lot of these guys are like that. So he's here because he really can play in the corner outfield, and probably on a team that isn't the Royals may have ended up in that position in the game. But he's still probably not the guy you're setting up. And now would you like to talk about the worst example of a DH, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.?
So in the case of Vlad, he's somebody that you would want to put at first base if you can. He's also capable of playing. I wouldn't play him at third base, but he is probably going to train up to 40-45 grade. He's definitely capable of fielding, which is why you would put him in the field rather than at designated hitter.
Because if you have a good fielder that's also your good hitter, why wouldn't you field them?
And I think Mike Trout in that regard.
But Pujols, I mean...
Yeah, that's true.
So take your advice, don't read the NL, yeah. And there's a reason the Cubs traded him away. Okay, so that's it for DH, and we briefly touched on pitchers, but we decided to include utilities as well, because you're probably going to be putting utilities on their team. So we're going to start with Infield Utilities and talk about a great infield utility named Eric Gonzalez. Mushroom, take it away.
So as you can see, Gonzalez has the range to play any position, which is definitely essential if you're looking for somebody who can step in at shortstop. And his error, arm, and turn double plays are all above average, which makes him competent at both second base and third base. So essentially, you need somebody who is capable of probably above average at all of the infield defensive ratings in order to be a good utility player.
And when if you're looking for a utility player, either in the draft or the minors, look for a mediocre shortstop, because they're going to be able to play all of the positions to some capacity. And here, Gonzalez is the great choice because he on some teams would be your shortstop.
Absolutely.
So we are next going to talk about Mr. I can play every position, including pitching and catching, Sue Lin. Who's not going to show up here. I have to type it in like this.
Oh, wait, he's right there.
Oh, he is. Okay. Also, his nickname is Tsunami, not Linny. Who, again, very similar looking. He's just a slightly worse shortstop than Gonzalez. And he doesn't have that great of an arm, but he can play anywhere in the infield. And he can catch and pitch. Look at this guy. Crazy. I don't know if you have any other things to add about Sue Lin.
No, not really. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, shout out to Tommy Edman. Let's look at Tommy Edman. After seeing
I believe he can play the outfield too. I think he's another one of those super utility guys. But he did start at third base for the Cardinals this year, right?
I don't know. I didn't watch any NL Central games. And then our bad utility, Jed Jerko. Moment of silence for Jed Jerko here. Who can't really play any position, and he's fully trained. We looked
at third base. I don't think he's fully trained at the other two, but yeah, he's short, so he can't play first base. Ideally.
Yeah, he's not. But for our purposes,
he's got low range, and he's not above average anywhere except error.
This is now a Red Sox appreciation stream. No, I did not once bring up. I'll have you know that we decided these players together.
Yeah, I would say that the only player that we chose quickly because he was a Red Sox would be Devers, right? And that was just because you were familiar with him.
Well, you even said you were going to suggest Devers, too, before I brought him up. So it wasn't even...
We didn't choose players because of the team they were
on. We never... And the only reason I nixed Martinez had nothing to do with his fielding ability. It was actually because, if we go back to DH... I don't think he's a good example in this game because his hitting was so poor this year. In the context of the game, you wouldn't DH him.
Yeah.
That's the only reason we didn't bring him up. But no, we didn't pick players because they were on specific teams. And we chose together, so. Alright, Outfield Utility. Would you like to talk about Outfield Utility with our best utility, Greg Allen?
Sure. So with Greg Allen, he's got the most important aspect, the range. So he is qualified to play center field, which is the primary thing you're looking for. If you're qualified to play center, you're going to be fine in the corners. His air and arm are also well above average, which is nice to have, especially in right field where the arm is going to play up. So he is definitely solid at all three positions, although he's not fully trained in left.
Yes. Again, when you're looking for your outfield utility, look for a mediocre center fielder. They'll be able to play anywhere. And then mediocre of mediocre outfield utilities, Mike Tachman, who again can play pretty much anywhere in the outfield, but because of his range not being so high, he's worse at center than the corners. But he's still, again, a decent choice, and in many teams, he would be your starting outfielder.
Yep.
And then finally, you specifically wanted him.
Oh, yeah.
Yasmani Tomas.
Yeah. Yasmani Tomas has terrible range, which means that he is incompetent at every outfield position except left. His error is below average, and his arm is not good enough to save him anywhere. So essentially, Yasmani Tomas is going to be a big hole. I mean, for the record, if you've ever seen Yasmani Tomas's quote-unquote best plays, it's literally just him lumbering in the direction of the ball and then falling down when his glove just happens to be where the ball is.
That reminds me of like Rusney Castillo in his best plays.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's it for all of our position things. Does anybody have any questions about anything in this game whatsoever about how to play it? Because now is the time for unrelated questions. Or is there anything that you want to bring up about anything in this game? Mushroom?
I don't really have anything.
Who do you...
42 is the meaning of life.
No, it's not. It's the answer to the ultimate question of the life, the universe, and everything, but we don't actually know what the question is. So...
That's true.
It's not the meaning of life, it's just the answer to the ultimate question. Didn't you read the books?
I did, but it has been a while.
Yeah. Who would you say is the best player in Out of the Park 21 and the worst player in Out of the Park 21?
Overall.
Just in general, best and worst.
Oh, best. I almost want to take a cheap shot and go with a catcher here.
I mean, it's your answer. It's just an opinion, so...
Okay, in that case, I'm going to go with Austin Hedges, because he is very cheaply affordable from the Padres and is probably the single best value on your team. High ability, high arm catcher. Well, of course, if you're doing a live start, yeah, but high ability, high arm catcher who can hit a little bit. He's going to probably be a 0 WAR offensive catcher, maybe a little lower than that, but he will win you 8 to 10 games defensively, so absolutely love that.
And worst in the game? Don't have them on your team.
Oh, there's so many options.
Pick a few.
Yasmani Tomas is tempting.
Pick a few, if you want to pick a few.
All right, well, I will have Yasmani Tomas added.
All right, well, we looked at him.
Yeah, I honestly, worst players I don't know as well because
Because you're an elitist?
Yeah, I only pay attention to the players I need, really. Thinking of the worst player, who's somebody I feel like hating on today.
That isn't somebody we've already mentioned.
Yeah, that isn't somebody we've already mentioned. Okay, opening the Dodgers. Going to the pitching. Okay, that's not going to do. Why are the Dodgers so overly powered in this game? Okay, random AAA player, AJ Ramos, who is a starting pitcher with no control and no stamina.
On the Rockies.
So low control. Oh, he's on the Rockies now?
He
Oh
was
my
brought up
goodness.
too.
Oh wow, I cannot believe they brought him up. Okay, well he's got better control in your game than mine. So that's something.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't really know my worst players well enough.
But yeah, again, any questions from anyone watching? Burning desires to know certain things, how they work in the game, whether that's stuff we talked about or stuff we didn't talk about. While we have our favorite mushroom here.
I do also want to see your least favorite player.
Oh, okay. So I don't do a lot of live starts. So I don't know as many players. I just know the ones you hate and the ones that everyone else hates. I would say best player in the game that I think is worth acquiring, Ryan Mountcastle.
Oh yeah, Ryan Mountcastle's great.
Because he always hits really well. And obviously he's already been brought up here, but if you were doing a live start, he's found on the Norfolk Tides, which is the minor league system. I don't think in this game, he never does well in left field with his ratings, which I don't know. We'll see how that works in real life, but he always hits really well. And then worst player, I'm trying to think. Who's a player that I would absolutely say don't get?
OTP Meme Lord is bringing up Evan White, who I believe is
the
most widely recognized. Yeah. Oh yeah, Chris Davis. I think he deserves a call out.
Chris Davis? Well, which Chris Davis? The C Chris Davis, I'm assuming?
Yeah, the C Chris.
On the same team as Ryan Mountcastle, by the way.
Yes, he is. And that contract is probably a big part of why.
Yep. His stats not very good, and we can look at his contract. At least they're almost out of the woods with him. They only have a couple years left.
The thing about Pujols is he's got a shorter contract than Davis.
Yes.
And he can play. He's actually got livable offensive ratings.
For some reason my chat is not refreshing. I need to do that. It's refreshing on the stream, but not on the tablet, so. But yeah, so let's see some of the questions, because they didn't come through. Alright, so now I'm seeing them. Okay, I can't get you perfect points. Don't give you an AMA. What attributes are important to consider for hitting and pitching coaches? Jamie wants to know.
Alright, you want your hitting and pitching coaches to work well with young players for all of your minor league teams.
Let's look, actually, this may not be the safe to do this one, but let's look at the Diamondbacks coaches and see. Okay, so these aren't going to work. But yeah, so sorry, continue. We're going to have to speak this one.
Alright, anyways, you want hitting coaches and pitching coaches for minor league teams that work well with young players. Ultimately, your older players in the minors, their development is not as important or important at all, whereas your prospects are going to be young and are going to have their development positively influenced by better young player coaches. For your MLB team, it depends on your play style, but generally speaking, you want them to either be neutral or work better with young players, and you also want them, if you have a specific type of player you're more often to acquire, like power pitchers or power hitters, you want them to work well with that type of player as well. If not, then you want balanced. It really does mostly matter on your play style, though, for the major leagues. For the minors, you do need young player.
Yes. And if you want, we can even edit the Diamondbacks coaches to make them overpowered.
Sure, why not?
Why not? Okay. No, actually, I don't want to do that because I want to use this save probably at some point. But you could, theoretically. Alright, and hello, Forest Hills Fighter. But my worst player, I think, who never pans out for me, is Jordan Yamamoto. Never works for me.
Yeah.
Never pans out. And if you, yeah. Other questions. You mean 2020 spring training MVP Chris Davis? Yes. And what attributes are important? Okay, yeah, so it was the same question. I'm sorry, I didn't see that before. I'm sorry, my chat for some reason just didn't refresh. And developmental budget. Can we talk about what developmental budget does?
So, this is something that has not been tested extensively. I'm also not sure about how much the coaching attributes affect your players, but I can say that getting it right is the difference between a superstar panning out and imploding.
I think that from what I've noticed, the coaching development budget, like specifically with coaches, it is helpful, especially when you have a lot of middle of the road prospects. But if you have a lot of really high end prospects, sometimes you can get away with inferior coachings. Oh, thank you, Skep, for gifting a sub to Teddy. Thank you so much. In general, though, you want to be just pouring as much money as you can into your development, because that's going to help your players absorb what the coaches teach as well.
Yeah.
But we haven't done much testing into specifically developmental budget, but the rule is dump as much money as you can. Just in general.
For those who care, that is on my projects list for Out of the Park 22, but it is going to take a long time to test because you cannot do it through simulation modules, and I'm not sure how accurate my results are going to be.
And I think specifically with development, there's going to be a number of factors.
Oh yeah.
Not like the personality traits for the player, the personality traits for the coaches, the money you stick in, and other things like team chemistry and where the coaches are playing them.
Those are things you can keep constant, but I do want to figure out how they work together, and that'll take even longer to do.
You'd have to test them all individually.
Yeah, and then I'd have to test each one with varying levels for each other.
But yeah, Michael Vick, put the $36 million into the development. It'll be worth it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Jamie wants to know, is personable trait a problem for coaches? I've never found
as far as I know, no. I'm definitely not for the major leagues, but for the minor leagues, I have really no idea.
I've never found it to be a problem or anything. They really need to expand coaching and development strategies. Yeah, the coaching in general, I honestly, with when I'm looking at coaches, like let's look at the Dodgers coaches just because we have them here and because we want to make Mushroom angry. Like, let's look at the pitching coach for the Dodgers when Bill Simas. No, it's not showing. Okay, maybe I don't want to go in the editor. Fine. But so if we look at the editor here, he's personable and he's fine. Usually I only pay attention to the development influence.
Yeah.
For the coaches. And whether or not, if you read the personality and style here, if they handle young players better.
Yeah, those are the two important things.
Yeah. Neither hockey game has more in-depth coaching system. Always funny to see Mark Pryor as the pitching coach. Yeah. Okay, so now that the chat is refreshed and I can see more questions, does anyone have other questions that we can answer? And these can be like historical sim questions too. We can load that up if you need it. You would love it if you could hire other teams' pitching and hitting coaches? Yeah, that would be cool. Provided they email you and allow you to offer a raise during the contract negotiation. Yeah. It definitely doesn't feel realistic. Here, just for, we'll take a look at the Diamondbacks, too, and their personnel, and their pitching coach. Oh, no, we can't do karaoke with a guest. So that's gonna have to wait until next stream.
Yeah, especially since I literally cannot sing.
Bench coach and manager personality affects team chemistry, yes. But you don't think personality matters for hitting pitching coaches. Yeah, I don't think it does either. What? Scammed? Listen, we can't do a duet because of the delay.
Oh, yeah, that would be a problem, too.
And it's not going to be fun for me to sit here for 3 minutes singing a song with you just sitting here. So your request will wait until Friday. There are a lot of things that feel unrealistic, but it's mostly nitpicking. Yeah. But it seems like we might not have more questions. Do you have questions, Mushroom, about things that you don't understand in this game?
Not really.
Are you sure about that?
Well, of course I have questions, but they're the kind of questions that I don't think I could answer within 1 hour.
Your request is Friday? Well, that's going to have to wait until Friday, because it's not going to happen here. Or do you have
Okay, you know what? If I ever get a Twitch thing set up, I will have karaoke redeemable, but it's going to take so many channel points that nobody is ever going to reach it.
You say that, but somebody will save up.
Yeah, but it's going to be so long in the future that OOTP is going to be this highly futuristic game. Yeah.
One thing that we should point out, though, on position ratings that we didn't point out, is that none of this applies if you're playing a historical sim. And I'm going to show you why. When you start a historical sim, your development is automatically set to historical. So from every year, the game will look at historical data and adjust players accordingly. You'd be accused of stealing it. Well, pretty much if you do take any of my ideas at this point, I'm going to accuse you of stealing because it's now kind of an inside joke. I rock this. But yeah, so for instance, let's look at our players here, and I'll show you who I have on my team, and that'll help you understand why historical doesn't work the same. So here we have Ted Williams, who played in left field, but not a very good outfielder. And we can't train these players because any training you put into them resets. So it doesn't matter here. And some of the stuff is unrealistic too. So like Johnny Pesky having all of this stuff at this level is ludicrous. But let me find a good example of somebody whose position doesn't match. Here, Bobby Dora doesn't have position ratings for anything other than second base. Would you say that this is a second baseman, Mushroom?
No, I'd say he's a shortstop.
He's a shortstop, but this is a historical sim, so he's a second base. If you turned historical development off, which I will show you how to do, you could put him at shortstop, and he would play there. But by default, you can just leave. It's just better for you to leave them if you have that turned on. And oh my god, time for your new channel point reward, tarot card reading. No one's ever redeemed that, actually. A couple people are like, oh my god, voodoo magic, and I'm like, you fundamentally do not understand tarot cards, but
Oh, when did you add that? I can't believe I haven't noticed it.
Months ago.
Oh, huh.
Yeah, so if you want to turn off historical development, go to your league settings and historical, and you need to uncheck automatically adjust league totals and recalc player ratings. You want to uncheck those. And actually, you can leave the statistical accuracy. It's the recalc. That's the big one. But you can uncheck both of them. And you also have a number of tools in here, so you can change recalc based on 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. And you can base ratings on neutralized stats as well. But just take a note, if you want to play a game where all of the players play historically, then then you're going to be stuck with the positions that they are at, which is fine. It just means you have to be more cognizant of who you're putting on your team, and where you're playing them and how they are going to be there. Because we can put, even though he can play shortstop effectively, we can't put him there because he's not going to get position rating. You have almost enough for the channel war. Nike should have sponsored Bobby and had a campaign, just door it. I don't think Nike existed then. Could never really get into historical sims. You think mostly because the contract's not being fully accurate is so frustrating? I just ignore it.
Honestly, and it's not for everyone, but it's definitely something I would recommend everybody try out.
Yeah. There was interest last Saturday when I asked on the Out of the Park development stream if people wanted a historical sim tutorial, which I would not be opposed to doing, because the way you set up the game and the way you play the game is very, very different depending on the era you choose from a live start, where not only do you have less to deal with in some cases, but the way you manage your team is different. So for example, in this sim, you don't have Rule 5 or like options, so you can just move players from one team to the other. So it changes how you store your prospects and how you're moving players from team to team. So are there any specific historical questions before we go? We've been going for a while. Or Mushroom, do you have any specific historical questions?
No, not really.
No, you have no questions.
Yeah, I will probably share my historical experience at some point because I have been doing historical sims lately.
Yeah, your sim is a little bit later than mine right now. Right?
Yeah, it's I started much later than you did.
What year did you start?
I started in 1946, right after World War II.
Yeah, it's 1946 right now in my game. It gets easier because players have no rights. Yeah, players, that's sort of an inside joke here. I hate players having rights, but they will start to get more rights pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm worried about that for my game.
You just have to start playing it like a live sim. You'll be fine.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, pre like 1950, the games work different. But okay, so it doesn't look like people have questions, so we will make this video, like this VOD, available to you guys. Like, we're gonna save it and put it on YouTube or somewhere else so that if you forget all this information about what we've said for position players, you'll be able to go back and find it, because Twitch does remove VODs every so often. So when that happens and we have a link or something, I will make sure to put that probably in my Discord server, which you can access here. We don't really do much in there, but that's the place that it's going to be posted in, and I'm sure you, Mushroom, will also distribute it elsewhere.
Yeah, I will probably distribute it through my Discord and my YouTube.
We'll make sure it's available for you guys, and unless there's large changes to Out of the Park 22, it hopefully will be useful for that as well. But yeah, I think that's going to be it from us. Oh yeah, other people have position rating guides on their YouTube channel too, like I Rock This has one as well.
Yeah, he does have one. I will be putting one up in probably about a month.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's gonna do it for us. Where can we find you, Mushroom?
You can find me on YouTube, and I'm in the Discord, the Reddit. I have a couple other places too. I'm either Sergeant Mushroom 39 or Sergeant Mushroom everywhere. So yeah.
So that's good to know, and Mushroom's a pretty cool guy. And you can catch me next on Friday when we will be playing more Out of the Park. But and bingo on Friday as well. So thank you all for watching. You have been great. I hope you all learned something, and we will see you later or elsewhere on a different day. So bye-bye. Say goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye, everybody.